Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Samslow33 here, and welcome to the show about Pokemon TCG stuff, mix-up, where I got a haircut. That's all today's episode is about. See you guys next time. Wait, what? What? Wait, I have to do Pokemon stuff today? My hair wasn't enough to entertain people? Oh, alright, okay. I got you. Alright, gotcha. So, in today's episode of Mix Up, we're going to be talking about the new Flashfire set that came out just a few weeks ago, and it is a quite interesting set. It's not one of the sets that totally is going to change the game and make it completely different, but there are a lot of cards that are very interesting and that are definitely worth looking into. So, without further ado, let's get into looking at the cards in this set right now.
The first card we're going to look at is Shiftry. Shiftry is pretty much Empoleon on steroids. Its ability lets you discard a grass energy from your hand and draw 3 cards, similar to Empoleon's ability, but with a steeper requirement and getting you an extra card. Its attack costs 1 grass and 2 colorless, and does 20 damage times the number of both players' bench Pokemon. Again, a steeper cost than Empoleon, but much bigger payout. If you have a full bench and a Silver Bangle or Muscle Band, your opponent only needs 3 bench Pokemon for you to be able to deal 180 damage. It may seem a little inconsistent, but we can play Energy Acceleration with this card too. Virizion EX is the first one that comes to mind. With built-in draw support, this deck might be consistent enough to actually work. Pyroar is one of the biggest players in this set. Its ability makes it immune to all damage from basic Pokemon. Talk about game-breaking. Half the decks in the XY format are comprised of entirely basic Pokemon. Plasma, Yveltal, Virizion Genesect, all of them rely on attacking with basics. Pyroar also happens to be the perfect type to pair with this ability. The 2 most common basic Pokemon that can hit through Pyroar's ability are Genesect with G-Booster and Cobalion EX, and Pyroar hits both of them for weakness. That's pretty nice if I do say so myself. Its attack is okay. It does 60 damage for a fire and 2 colorless, and you can discard a fire energy on Pyroar to deal 30 more damage. Its attack gets the job done against fire-weak Pokemon, but you're usually better off going with Pokemon that switch into Pyroar, such as Palkia and Aselgor. Pyroar is definitely one of those cards that will change the way players build their decks as long as it's in the format. The next card is Milotic. This card opens up a lot of creativity for new decks in the format, which is always exciting. Its ability, Energy Grace, lets you knock out Milotic and attach 3 basic energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon that's not an EX. If it hadn't had that last sentence, EXs would have another easy way to put on pressure super quick. But now that it's restricted to non-EXs, they get a very nice way to accelerate energy that EXs don't. And I think I can speak for everyone when I say the more non-EX decks in the format, the better. But if you really want to use this to accelerate EX Pokemon, a fun little trick you could do is Energy Grace onto a Ditto, then transform it into the EX you want. The effect is really strong too. 3 energy from your discard is really solid. Giving up that extra prize can be painful, but the effect is still better than Cofagrigus, and that's seen a fair amount of play since its release. You don't even need to focus your deck around Milotic. It can just be a way to power up that 1 or 2 Pokemon you need to keep your stream of attackers going. Non-EXs that need a way to accelerate energy will surely find Milotic quite helpful. This set's also got a brand new Dusknoir. It's not nearly as good as the older Dusknoir, but it's just as splashable. Its ability says as often as you like during your turn, you can move a damage counter from one of your Pokemon to this Pokemon. It's also got a nice combo with its attack. For each damage counter on Dusknoir, you put that many damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. With the Psychic Energy cost, I really don't know what deck you can use Dusknoir as an attacker, but its ability is very strong. If one of your EXs takes a big hit, you can simply move that damage onto Dusknoir and keep your EXs alive. This is especially good with Max Potion, being able to easily heal 120 damage, since Dusknoir will never have energy on it. The ability is definitely worse than Reuniclus' damage swap, but Dusknoir has quite a few perks over Reuniclus. Dusknoir and all of its pre-evolutions have much higher HP than Reuniclus, which is one of the reasons Reuniclus doesn't see much play. It also allows you to easily play the Sinister Hand Dusknoir, and no deck can complain about being able to move your opponent's damage as much as you want. This Dusknoir is actually a pretty nice card, and really easy to play in decks that also play the older Dusknoir, or you can make a deck based around the new Dusknoir. Our next card is Floette. Yes, Floette has caught the electric syndrome, in that it's more playable than its final evolution. Floette definitely isn't as strong as electric, and Florges is actually miles better than any Electros, but Floette is still a neat little card. Its ability states that all grass Pokemon get plus 20 HP. Not fairy Pokemon, but grass Pokemon. The obvious combo with this card is playing it in Virizion Genesect, since almost all of the deck is grass type. Some players played Umbreon in Virgin for the same reason, but Floette gives the HP to Virizion as well. The downside with Floette is that it has only 70 HP, and Flabebe has only 40. With Umbreon having 120 with its ability in effect, that's a pretty steep trade-off for giving Virizion more HP. Or if you want to make a really crazy deck, you can play Floette with Mega Venusaur and give it up to 310 HP. As said earlier, the Florges isn't half bad. It has an attack for 1 cardless to search your deck for any 3 cards and put them into your hand. A very nice attack indeed, but with it being a stage 2, and the fact that evolving into it removes the ability of Floette, Florges might not be played in those decks. Oh my god, this next card is amazing. This card is something that we would have loved to have in the format over a year ago, and still do. That card, my friends, is Druddigon. For 2 cardless, it has Revenge. 20 plus 70 if one of your Pokemon was knocked out last turn. You know what this means, right? We now have a Dragon type that can 1-hit KO Black Kyurem and Rayquaza, and it only costs 2 energy, and it doesn't even get knocked up by Baby Black Kyurem and Rayquaza. This card is just outstanding. Being able to KO those Pokemon for a double cardless and only giving up 1 prize is just incredible. Any deck that has trouble with Blastoise or Raybor and plays DCE can easily include a few of these and the matchup should skyrocket. With this card and Beach being rotated, Blastoise and Raybor may finally fall off the map after Worlds. Dragalge is a pretty cool little card. Its ability prevents your opponent from retreating if they're poisoned. Poison is by far the most powerful special condition right now, with Hypnotoxic Laser, Virbank, and the new Toxicroak EX all either causing poison or improving it. If your opponent can't retreat out of poison, they'll take up to 90 damage going into their next turn with a Virbank in play. They can still use switching cards, Keldeo EX, and Virizion EX, but retreating is still one of the most common ways to get around poison. Then again, Garbodor shuts off half the things I just mentioned, so it may be better to continue playing that with poison decks, but Dragalge still has potential in the right metagame. Next up is Miltank. Miltank is quite the nice card for Stage 2 decks. I mean, it's not like it's gonna work in any other deck. Its attack does 10 damage for a colorless, but if you have a Stage 2 in play, it does 70 more damage. 80 for 1 is obviously a great attack. If you can't afford to use your Stage 2 to attack, or don't attack with your Stage 2 at all, Miltank can come in handy. Something like Blastoise can't really get a use out of Miltank, since you're aiming to one-shot everything with Black Kyurem and Keldeo, but in most other decks it should work great. With its nice and bulky 100 HP, Miltank is a great card for most rogue Stage 2 decks. And that's it for the regular Pokemon. Time to look at the trainers. Our first is the combination of the item Fiery Torch and the supporter Blacksmith. Fiery Torch lets you discard fire energy from your hand and draw 2 cards. For fire decks, that's a pretty nice draw engine, as long as you run an appropriate amount of fire energy. Blacksmith attaches 2 fire energy from your discard to one of your fire Pokemon. Combo much? Discard energy with Fiery Torch and attach them back with Blacksmith, and you still get to draw cards in your turn even though your supporter for the turn is Blacksmith. There's also plenty of other ways to get energy in the discard, including Ultra Ball and Juniper. Blacksmith is a very strong card for fire decks, but I don't think Fiery Torch can keep you drawing consistently throughout the game, so I think you might need some other draw support if you want to make a Blacksmith deck. Besides the new Charizard EXs, I can't really think of a good fire type to use these cards with, but whenever they do come along, Blacksmith and Fiery Torch will surely be right beside them. Palpad is interesting. It lets you shuffle 2 supporters from your discard into your deck. With all the new supporter cards in this set like Lysandre and Blacksmith, it's likely you'll have to discard them with Juniper or Ultra Ball before you can use them. so being able to shuffle them back into your deck late game when you actually need them is a good effect, or just to shuffle in some Junipers and Colress in preparation for an end to 1 or 2. On the other hand, you can make the argument that you could just play another supporter instead of Palpad, since Palpad is not good to have without another supporter in your hand. If your deck has a lot of situational supporters, Palpad might come in handy if you think your deck is consistent enough without another draw supporter. For our next item, we have Protection Cube. It's a tool card that makes the Pokemon it's attached to take 0 damage from its own attacks. So attacks like Bolt Strike, Brave Fire, and the new Crimson Dive won't do any damage to the Pokemon using the attack. Of course, if you're playing Zekrom, Reshiram EX, or Mega Charizard Y, Protection Cube is a great inclusion. But I don't think those cards are good enough to become playable just because of Protection Cube. And that's pretty much all I can say about this card. So, yeah. Our next card is Sacred Ash. It lets you shuffle 5 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck. At first it looks like Super Odd on Power Creep steroids, but Sacred Ash can't get energy, while Super Odd can. I can't really think of any deck that would need to shuffle in that many Pokemon, but doesn't also need to shuffle in basic energy. Maybe for decks with Stage 2 attackers, since they run a lot of Pokemon, but getting back energy isn't something you should take for granted, and makes the card useful in more situations. I'd say Super Odd is better than Sacred Ash in most decks, but Super Odd is likely to be rotated soon, and Sacred Ash definitely isn't that bad as substitute. Speaking of replacements after a card is rotated, our next card is Startling Megaphone. It's an item that discards all Pokemon tools on your opponent's Pokemon. What the heck was that? Oh, that was the sound of Tool Drop dying. May your spirit rest in peace, because you're obviously never going to be played in a tournament deck ever again. However, I'm not sure if this card is better than Tool Scrapper. Not many decks, besides Tool Drop, have more than 2 tools in play at a time, so the extra discard may not come into play that often, and in some cases, you may want to discard your own tools. You might want to discard a Muscle Band on Genesect so you can attach a G-Booster to it, or if you want to activate your own Dark Cloak in an Yveltal Garbodor deck. There's also times where you don't want to discard one of your opponent's tools in play. Like if they have a Floatstone on their Yveltal EX, you don't want to discard that because you don't want it to have a Muscle Band on it. But there are some cases where your opponent has 3 tools in play that you all want to discard, so Startling Megaphone isn't that bad of a card. If you're playing 2 Tool Scrapper, I'd change one of them to a Megaphone, but I think Tool Scrapper is probably the better card overall. The next card is Trick Shovel. It's an item that lets you look at the top card of either player's deck, and you can discard it or put it back on top of the deck. It's a pretty interesting disruption card. If your opponent is drawing dead, you can make sure they never draw a supporter. Or you can just discard valuable resources. And if you have no supporter, you can use your Trick Shovels to see if you're drawing a supporter next turn, or make it so you draw one. Just like Catcher, you can save them all until the end, and you may be able to discard the card your opponent needs to win. I actually think this is a pretty solid disruption card. Getting rid of valuable resources can easily win you a couple games, and unlike most disruption cards, it can actually help advance your board position by looking at your own top card. Now we move on to the supporters. Out of all of them, not a single one of them draws you cards, but most of them are good. The first one, besides Blacksmith, is Lizandre. This card is simply Catcher without a flip. I already talked about this card in my Catcher card of the day, but I'll go over it again real quick. Catcher and Lizandre are both playable, but it depends on the deck which one is better. Fast, aggressive decks will prefer Catcher, but slower decks that either have some other way to draw cards, or decks that can't afford to flip tails on Catcher will prefer Lizandre. I'm sure Lizandre, as well as Catcher, will see some play at Nationals and Worlds. Our next card, however, probably won't. That card is Pokemon Center Lady. It lets you heal 60 damage and remove all special conditions from one of your Pokemon. If you're facing a Selgor, this card is going to be your MVP, clearly. But the card seems a little situational, and a dead card in matchups that one-shot all of your Pokemon. If you're that worried about poison, just play a Counter Stadium or a Switch. Those won't use up your supporter for the turn. The final supporter in this set is Pokemon Fan Club. It lets you search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them in your hand. Finally! A new card that searches for Pokemon! That makes, what, 5? and 4 of them only work for certain decks, and 1 of them is a supporter. Anyway, I like Fan Club, even if it is just a weaker Pokemon collector. As I've said many times, I'm sick and tired of the only solid search card being Ultra Ball, and the discard of it can be painful for certain decks. Basics are the main thing you need early on in the game, so Fan Club is a good card early game to help set up. A card that combos incredibly well with Fan Club is Jirachi EX. Not only can Jirachi search for Fan Club early game, but Fan Club can search for Jirachi anytime to get you out of a dead hand. This combination might be good enough to make Fan Club a pretty playable card. That's it for the supporters, but there's one stadium card we have to look at before we move on to the EXs. That card is Magnetic Storm. Magnetic Storm removes resistance from all Pokemon in play. If you're playing a fighting deck that doesn't already run a stadium, this is a nice card to play in it. But sadly, most other decks have no use for it. Wasn't that the same thing everyone said about Ruins of Alph a couple of years ago? Now on to the EXs. We have 5 EXs and 3 Megas in this set. We're actually not starting off with an EX that evolves into a Mega. We're starting off with Magnezone EX. A Lightning type EX with 180 HP. How can this be bad? It should one-shot Yveltal and Lugia. Well, somehow they've managed yet again to print a Lightning type EX that sucks so bad it can't even beat Yveltal on a prize trade. Its first attack does 40 for 2 Carless, and that's it. Its second attack costs 3 Lightning, and it does 50 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Yes, instead of making it do 90 for 3, they gave it the attack of Kyogre EX. Why do they do this to us? I swear, they're going to make an EX of every Lightning Pokemon ever, and not have a single one be good. Honestly, the first attack is the best part about this card. It 2-shots Yveltal for just a DCE and a Muscle Band. It could be an alright tech for decks that play DCE. I've seen some people play Excadrill EX to some success, so it wouldn't surprise me honestly. Next is Toxicroak EX. Although this is my second least favorite EX in the set, I like this card a fair bit. It has an attack for 2 Carless, I'm noticing a theme here, that poisons the defending Pokemon, but does 30 damage between turns. The best part is you can play a Burbank down and do 50 damage between turns. That damage adds up really fast if your opponent can't move their active Pokemon. Going back into their turn, that's 150 damage for just a DCE. The big problem with this card are the same problems that Hypnotoxic Laser has. Virizion EX and Keldeo EX make this attack near useless. There are 2 cards that you can pair with Toxicroak, Dragalge or Garbodor. Dragalge is better against Yveltal and Plasma, while Garbodor is good against Blastoise, Emboar, and best of all, Virgin. The card you choose depends on the metagame. If you make the right call, Toxicroak can bring you pretty far, but if you make the wrong call, you're not going to have a fun tournament. Our next cards are Kangaskhan EX and Mega Kangaskhan EX. These Pokemon don't do that much damage, nor do they have abilities, but they have some other good uses. The regular Kangaskhan has Triple Draw. For 1 energy, it does exactly what it sounds like, draw 3 cards. For 1 Carless, that's a pretty good attack. That's around the same amount you'll draw from a Tropical Beach half the time. And this card doesn't cost $200. Its second attack is called Kindred Kick. For 3 Carless, it does 70 and you flip a coin. If heads, you deal 30 more. Not the best attack for 3 energy, but it gets the job done. The Mega Evolution's attack is called Wham Bam Punch. For 3 energy, it does 100 damage and you flip until you get tails. For each heads, you deal 30 more damage. I was hoping they could have thought of something more interesting, considering how unique the Mega Kangaskhan in the video game is, but whatever. The attack is okay. With a Muscle Band and 2 heads, you can one-shot any EX Pokemon. Maybe with Fliptini this could be a powerhouse of a Pokemon, but I think it's better to just forget about trying to get lucky on flips. The real draw of this card is its 230 HP, and what makes this card more playable than past Megas is because its attack is actually affordable. You can even play a Spartia City Gym and a Hard Charm to effectively give it 270 HP. That is nearly impossible to kill in 1 hit, or even 2. The best way to take advantage of this is with either Aromatisse, Reuniclus, or Dusknoir FF to keep it alive as long as possible. This also eliminates the need to waste 2 or 3 turns evolving into 2 or 3 Mega Kangaskhan's. It's powerful enough and easy enough to set up that it can win you the game before your field gets too flooded with damage. I really do like Mega Kangaskhan. With such ridiculous HP, you can easily keep this thing alive long enough to wear down your opponent and win. For our final cards, we have Charizard EX, Mega Charizard YEX, and Mega Charizard XEX. Oh, and the promo Charizard. What is with all these Charizards? Is this all really necessary? Well, whatever. Let's go from EX to Mega, then worst to best. The promo Charizard is my least favorite of the Charizards. For a Fire and a Colorless, you can search your deck for a Mega Charizard and put it in your hand. This attack is kind of a waste, since you're going to have to waste one turn searching for the Mega, then another turn evolving into it. Its second attack does 120 for a Fire and 3 Colorless, and you deal 30 to yourself. It's an okay attack, especially with Protection Cube, but the other Charizards have much better attacks with similar damage outputs and energy costs. The next Charizard is pretty good. For 1 Colorless, it has Stoke. You flip a coin, and if heads, you search your deck for 3 basic energy and attach them to Charizard. Talk about a powerful turn 1 play. 4 energy in play on the first turn you can attack, assuming you flip heads, of course. Just be careful around Yveltal EX. Another great part about this attack is it can be any basic energy, and it costs colorless energy. A fun concept with this card could be playing a Ho-Oh style deck, where you get a Stoke off early, then get it to the bench and energy switch the energy to other Pokemon. A little inconsistent, but it could be fun. But we do have to remember that this attack requires a coin flip. It is really good if you flip heads, but that won't always happen, of course. Its second attack is the same as the promo Charizard's second attack, but the drawback is discarding an energy instead of taking 30 damage. It isn't the worst attack in the world, but isn't all that exciting either. The final Charizard is definitely the best, even counting the Megas. Its first attack does 60 for 3 Colorless. Boo. Its second attack is called Combustion Blast, which does 150 damage for 2 Fire and 2 Colorless, and you can't use Combustion Blast next turn. The reason this card is so good is because you can feasibly use this attack on the first turn. Just discard 2 Fire energy, use Blacksmith, and attach a DCE. And with a Muscle Band, you can deal 170. That does seem like a lot to draw on the first turn, but if you play lots of Fiery Torches and Bicycles, it can't be that hard. Even if you can't pull that off turn 1, a turn 2 Combustion Blast for 170 is still incredibly solid, and it's not that hard to set up Charizards later on in the game either. This kind of speed Charizard could have potential to be a top tier deck. Wait, what did I just say? A Charizard is actually playable? What sorcery is this? The Megas are both okay. Both are pretty similar, and both are equally hilarious. Mega Charizard Y has an attack for 2 Fire and 3 Colorless, which does 300 damage, and you take 50. That seems a little overkill, but I'll take it. The card seems kind of pointless. The regular Charizard already one-shots most things, and the attack does 50 to itself, so it even defeats the purpose of having tons of HP. You could put a Protection Cube on it, but that seems like too many cards and too inconsistent for a super aggressive deck like Charizard. Mega Charizard X fixes these problems, but adds some new ones. This one also does 300 damage for 5 energy, but it costs 2 Fire, a Dark, and 2 Colorless instead, and you discard the top 5 cards of your deck instead of taking 50 damage. Unlike a Mega Charizard Y, this one can take more hits because it doesn't do damage to itself, not to mention it has 10 more HP. But you need a Dark Energy to attack at all, and it has the added drawback of discarding the top 5 cards of your deck. Like I said before, both of these cards have pretty big drawback with not much payoff. If you're willing to focus a lot of your deck around a Mega Charizard, I think X is the way to go. But if you're just trying to use Speed Charizard and want to play one Mega, I think Y is the better option.
And that's gonna do it for today's episode. I thank you all for watching. I'm definitely excited for this new Nationals and Worlds format with Flashfire, and I really can't wait. I think it's gonna be really cool. Really gonna throw the game off track, and definitely no clue what the results are gonna be, because it's really up in the air for what decks could be good at Nationals and Worlds. So yeah, next video I'm really not sure what I'm gonna do for Mix-Up or Black Factory L. They probably look at one of the new decks that's come out of this set. I have my eye on Toxicroak and Charizard right now, but there are definitely other options for cards to look at. So yeah, thanks all for watching. Have a good day. Make sure to leave down in the comments what you thought about the video and what you think about certain cards in the set. Or if you just want to comment on something else, anything really, tell me if you liked it or not, or just, like or dislike the video to save you some time. So, thanks you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.